before we start this episode, feast your eyes on this picture. That is Mount Washington. And in fact, on the day before we summited Mount Washington, that's the only clear view that we got of the mountain. After that, we never saw it again. That gives you an idea of what the conditions were like the day we decided to summit Mount Washington. Get your watch on charge. It's 5:15. Charge and I have just made final preparations to go up Mount Washington. How are you feeling?
Good morning, Flash. Yeah, 5:16 now. And we're going up there. And then we're going around the corner. There's Mount Washington. We're going up there. So we've got about 4.5 hours of
Slog.
climbing. 6,200 feet elevation.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
It'll be great once we get there. The bit that I'm most concerned about is we've got to walk right up that, and from this perspective, it's quite steep. We started walking, and as we walked and got higher, the weather started to close in. The wind came up, and the cloud came down. We'd checked the weather forecast, and so we knew that the weather was going to be better in the morning, but the weather forecast did not predict what was to happen over the next 13 hours. The severity of the weather, the wind, and the cloud. That's where we're going. It's blue-ish over there, but we're heading to Mount Washington, which is under all of those clouds. Yeah, weather's not looking any better as we plod towards Mount Washington. Really hard going today. Joe and I are both exhausted, and yeah, it's tough. And to add insult to injury, we picked a day to climb that all of the huts were transitioning and getting ready for the season. So there were 3 huts, Mitzpah, there was the cloud in the lake in the clouds, and there was the Madison hut. We couldn't get into any of them, so there was nowhere that we could shelter at any point in the 13 hours. Couldn't see each other. This is me emerging from the clouds, and it was starting to get a bit scary. I was falling a lot, and I was losing sight of Joe on the mountain. No kidding! Photos at the summit. Yeah. Hang on! it was after this that things started to get really tough. Summiting Mount Madison after we summited Mount Washington was really tricky. Very little visibility, extremely steep and large and slippery rocks, and we just couldn't see where we were going. So we kept slogging along, and then we hit a snow bank, a snow ice cliff that we had to get across. And now we've got snow. This is obviously filmed after the fact, but so we got to the snow, and it was a big bank of snow. And because we had no visibility, we couldn't see where other hikers had entered the snow in order to get across it. So we decided to go up to the top. And we were having to stick our feet and poles into the snow to stop sliding down a really steep hill. And it was really scary, really, really scary. So we got across. Joe slid. I slid. I ended up sticking my leg all the way through. I was wearing shorts right up to my hip. And we eventually got off the snow. It took a while. And we've talked to other hikers since, and they've all found it really scary. Once we got across, we discovered that, in fact, there had been a path cut by other hikers, but we couldn't see it because we couldn't see anything. So we made it across the snow.
So here's Flash and I going up Mount Madison. Here comes Bridgie. And this is what we're going up. Trail my butt.
.30 a.m. on the 1st of June. I don't know what day of the week is. Maybe it's Thursday the 1st of June. We've just had a massive sleep. I think I've slept more last night than I've slept for 2 months. We were just wrecked yesterday. It was an extremely hard day. We got in really late. We were walking from just after 5 in the morning till 6, after 6, I don't know. But we were pretty destroyed when we got here, pitched our tent, made ourselves eat some dinner, rehydrated cheesy mashed potato and tuna, had a hot chocolate and just fell into bed. Made a pact that we would sleep as long as we needed to, not do anything or feel any time pressure to do anything. We've got 4.6 miles to do today to get to Pinkham Notch, and then we're going to get picked up by shuttle and taken to the Barn Hostel in Gorham City. Yeah, we were pretty down last night about the trail. Yesterday was just rocks and stones and hand over hand climbing. I fell over so many times, potholing through snow. I mean, it was pretty ugly, but I think we need a couple of days off, lots of sleep, some good food, and we'll assess the situation then. But I think 2 months in, we've been going for 2 months. We're just tired and a bit run down and need a good shower, some clean clothing and some good food as ever. As I said earlier, we've got about 4.6 miles to head back down the mountain before we get picked up, taken into Gorham, which is a town that's really at the centre of the presidential range of mountains, which is the mountains that we've been climbing on yesterday. But the interesting thing about our campsite, which as Kiwis we're not familiar with, is that the campsites have these wooden tent pads, and you erect your tent on top of the flat wooden tent pad, which sometimes can be a bit challenging if you don't have a freestanding tent. So what we did, or what Joe did, because he's very clever about things like this, is we'd bought some picture hanging hooks, and we just screwed them into the wooden tent pad and were able to hook our tent onto the wooden platform. So we've just finished packing up. I'm heading back to our tent site, and we think it might be going to rain, so we are going to head on down to Pinkham Notch, where I am to call the owner of the hostel, who drives a shuttle, and he will come and collect us and take us back to the hostel, which I believe is quite central. So this is the tent pad that we erected our tent on last night. It was a lovely, quiet, flat spot, and even though it rained, we were really, really cosy and toasty. 8:37, and we're on trail. You'll see a little bit more of me today. I haven't recorded over the last couple of days much, because I've just been too busy just trying to, getting myself along the trail. As I said, really quick and short walk, 4.6 miles down to Pinkham Notch, where they have a visitor centre, so I'm envisaging a hot drink. Coffee would be really nice. Conditions are cool, potentially going to rain, and it's rocky, so I'll put this down and get walking. Oh, we're at it again. Those boulders and rocks, they keep on coming. This has been the morning of river crossings, without bridges or creek crossings. Excuse the coughing, I just ate a bug.
Here comes Bridget. And she's going to look at a rock wall. Doesn't look that steep from here. Now, Bridget, you can do it.
Time to use the hands.
Well done. Go Flash.
And here we are, 2.5 hours later, walking out to Pinkham Notch in civilization. We've been out the back of nowhere with little or few phone reception for the last wee while, so I need to call my mum, call my sister. Joe's discovered a snack place because I can see drinks and things lined up, so we'll be straight into that. But it's really, 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 is it enough reallys? Good to be here. The Mount Washington summit may only be 4.1 miles away, but oh my goodness.
Just done quite couple I've hiked in New Zealand.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Hiked through the Douro Valley in Portugal. Done a lot of cycling.
Here's the Cadillac that Paul picked us up in and took us back to the barn, which is a great hostel. I mean, there's a communal sleeping area and it looks messy in this photo because this is the next morning and none of us had made our beds. But it was comfortable, it was dry, there was loaner clothing, there was laundry, and it did everything that we needed it to do. More importantly, it was off the mountain. Okay, time for a bit of context. This is the text that I received from the US Embassy merely days before we were to go for our interview to get our 6-month visa to visit the United States. Without this appointment, we could only come for 3 months, and I couldn't get another appointment till July, which just wasn't going to fit with our time schedule. So, Joe and I bought tickets to the United States, and we flew over and started walking. It's exactly 1 week since Joe and I summited Mount Washington in the presidential range, and it's taken me a bit of time to get around to editing this video because there's been quite a lot going on. You might wonder where we are. We're in fact in Des Moines, Iowa. We just had Mexican food, it was delicious. So there's been a lot going on. It's all good, and it's been a really interesting outcome, and we're on a slightly different adventure now, but I'm going to give you some context and explain how it all went down and give you some insight as to what it was like to summit Mount Washington and Mount Madison in the presidential range. So 5 days ago, this happened. So what do you do in Maine when you're in
lobster,
Maine?
Bridget.
You eat lobster and you wear a bib.
Yeah, and you have Yukon potatoes
Yep,
and corn,
yep.
some asparagus.
And that is a big crustacean you've got on your plate.
Yeah, it's actually our 3rd course, and 1 more to come. Actually, there's a good Chardonnay sitting next to California, so it's cool, coast to coast.
We're malnourished, we need to build ourselves up.
It's our 2nd journey. Let's go.
What you doing these days, Joe? Driving.
East to west.
Driving until we hit the ocean.
Correct. Fingers in the Atlantic. Soon they'll be in the Pacific.
Yeah. And eating. A bit of eating. We're doing some catching up. And drinking good wine.
Maybe Jack Daniels too.
Maybe Jack Daniels. Hey Joe.
Hello, Bridget.
You're looking pretty flash for a hiker.
Yes, I am. Town clothes.
Town clothes. So it's a week since we went up Mount Washington, and you know, I've edited up the film and put that together. But 1 week down the track, we find ourselves, interestingly, in a place we never thought we'd be, Des Moines, Iowa. Why are we here?
Because that's where the car took us. Look, when we got back on the trail after Chief left us, we went from Liberty Falls car park, and in 3 days went from there. Basically did all the major mountains, so the presidentials and the whites, and or the other way around, the whites first, then the presidentials. And we came down Mount Washington, or we hit Mount Washington in exceptionally bad weather. It was cold, it was wet, and no visibility whatsoever.
It was scary.
Yeah, and you know, it's we both had falls. I had a really bad fall the day before, and I tried to crack open a massive rock for my head. Luckily my right shoulder took the impact, but also did my right knee in. So we limped into town.
Into Gorham.
Into Gorham, yeah, to the barn, and we were beaten up, and we both looked at each other and said, no, we're not going to make a decision. And we spent a few nights there and just seeing one of our bodies were going to come right. The weather changed. It was starting to actually clear up and be warm, so it wasn't a weather situation. It was purely about our bodies, and myself, I've done something to my right knee. My shoulder, which took the impact on the rock, is still sore, so I've done some damage on that too. And let alone yourself, and with your lovely oversized toe. And
my feet are a disaster.
And your other foot is actually where you damaged in Pennsylvania on the second week we were on the trail.
I'm sure it's a stress fracture.
So we always said when we left, at any stage where we thought that one, we had enough, or two, that our bodies weren't coping, that we would actually have a few days off, ask the question, and head off to trail. So we decided to rent a car. And we picked up the rental, and our first stop was actually a outlet shopping mall. We bought some town clothes, so we weren't hiker trash. So, you know, dress shoes, jeans, new underpants, some shirts, and deodorant, a razor, which is really cool, and we decided to do a roadie. So we drove from Gorham through to Bar Harbour, Maine, lobster and Chardonnay, so we actually looked after ourselves a little bit. Stuck our hand into the Atlantic Ocean. From there we turned around, and the last 3 days we've travelled 1,600 miles, and we're in pretty much the middle of the US, and so it's called a roadie, and we're on the way to the Pacific coast, and we'll stick our hand in the ocean over there. So 855 miles we hiked.
Sensational.
Hey, look, it was hard. It was harder than what we envisaged. We actually hit the trail very, very fit, and it was a hard trail. The time of the year that we actually obviously were hiking was the cooler season. We were putting in some fairly tough miles. Our bodies didn't handle it too well, but should be right. But now we're sitting in the sun.
I know.
I have a cigar in my hand. We just had a beautiful Mexican meal with some craft beer, and just loving life. And so it's another adventure. And hey, East Coast to West Coast. It's great.
And so Kiwis in the woods have now become
Kiwis having a roadie.
Kiwis in the car.
Kiwis having a roadie.
It's fantastic. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Bridget.
I would walk up that towpath, but my feet are still too sore. So as Joe has already said, we got down Mount Washington, Mount Madison, went to the barn hostel, and we hung out with some really great hikers. We hung out with Goofy, we hung out with Papa Foxtrot, we hung out with Jackie and Yota, and we hung out with a couple of others. Anyway, we were really excited for them and their hikes, but we just knew that we'd finished, we'd had enough. So we made a very, very easy transition from being through hikers to section hikers, and are incredibly proud of the 850 miles that we hiked. We had a 3-month window. So when the American embassy closed just before our visa interview in March, and we had to make the decision to either pull the plug on our big adventure or just go. We knew that potentially 3 months would be all that we had if we couldn't organise out a visa extension from the States, and turns out that was going to be kind of problematic and a 50-50 kind of option. So by the time we were contemplating, should we stay on the trail or should we go, we just didn't have enough time to get to Mount Katahdin, and we certainly didn't have enough time to get to Mount Katahdin and rest our injuries. And what's the point of just nearly getting there and completely thrashing ourselves? There's no point. We'd got what we wanted from our through hike, or our section hike, and we're really excited about this new adventure, which is seeing parts of the States that we haven't seen before, heading towards the west coast and visiting some places like Oregon, Montana, South Dakota that we love, Colorado, and then going and visiting our beautiful friend Joan, who lives in the Bay Area. So a whole bunch of really great stuff coming up, and we're really proud of ourselves. Thank you so much for coming along on the journey. We've had incredibly supportive commentary, supportive comments, and lots of love from people. So I hope you've enjoyed how we've shared our adventure with you, and don't feel sad that our adventure is finished maybe sooner than it could have. It's finished at exactly the right time for us, and we've moved on to another adventure. So Kiwis in the woods over and out. Kiwis in the car, or Kiwis on a roadie, I'm not sure I'm going to post that. But lots of love to everybody, and for those of you in New Zealand, we'll see you soon.